and I don't know if it exactly relates to it, but it occurred to me listening to Jotai's talk when she was talking about being fearless, because that's part of it. It's just like a lack of anxiety. Even when it's come to like having the stroke and being scared. You know, when I was scared right when it was happening, and I could kind of sense something weirder was going on and tingling in my arm. But then, you know, you start second guessing yourself a little bit, and nothing else seemed to happen. And I just never thought about a stroke. If I'd thought about that or knew anything about it, I might have panicked more. But I felt like something was weird, and then it was over. And then, you know, you had a stroke. Well, that's scary, and particularly, you know, in night, laying in the hospital, I think the first night after which it was clear it happened, I did remember waking up sometimes, laying there thinking, Jesus, you know, particularly the thought of like having a stroke and not dying, but, you know, being crippled or, you know, but there was not a lot of that. I wasn't, oddly, the being in the hospital was almost like a little sesshin, and I felt great. I mostly slept better than I normally do. I didn't sleep a lot of long hours, but I slept well. And ever since then, it's left me with a much more vivid feeling of impermanence and fear of dying, and I mean, I don't know, almost just the physicalness of the body, and kind of grounding in that way. I mean, things seemed, leaving the hospital, it was very odd leaving the hospital the night I left. We drove down 3rd Street and through West Hollywood, which is, surprisingly, it's like being in Mexico, 9:30 at night, and all the restaurants are full of people on a weeknight, which my sister said, well, of course, that's, Thursday night's practically the weekend. And you know how that is. I mean, it's a trendy part of town, and people are in restaurants and talking, and everything looked like a movie set or like puffed up, and not in a bad way, but and people look puffed up, and it looks so unreal in a way, and there is still that lingering feeling of like how, boy, we take all sorts of stuff so seriously, and yet we're like just living on the edge, and time goes by so quickly. But fearlessness, and just thinking about death even. I mean, I had a couple of experiences, remembering my dad dying, and this is something where I started when I was thinking about Jotai's talk about being fearless. And a lot of my fear and anxiety, you know, obviously, I suppose, comes from just thinking about dying itself. I mean, I'm the kind of person, I don't sit in the daytime, I'm not particularly morose or sitting and worrying about that in the daytime. And it's like this thing with the stroke. In waking hours, it's very easy to feel like nothing's changed in a way. I mean, you know, I have some elevated level of risk of having an event, you know, sort of like anything. We all have, risks of getting hit by a car, and a number of you in this room all have much higher stroke risks per year than I do. Not that I'm looking at any smokers or people over 60. But it's a very visceral thing, that, you know, fear of dying. And that's the kind of thing that wakes in the night, like, oh my God, you know, wake up, go into the bathroom, and being that in-between state, and it's like it hits you in the reality of that, like at some deeper level. It's like, and somebody died on TV, a guy, he's an anchorman on CNBC. He's like one of the founding guys. He was like the Walter Cronkite of that little sub-universe, and I've watched that stuff for years and years and years. A guy named Mark Haynes. He was just a very likable guy. I came across, sort of unusual in that world. He wasn't a Wall Street guy. He was an old lawyer who had been an anchorman in local news channels, and he just died abruptly. You know, one of those things. I happened to see him when he signed off the last week on a Friday. He was taking the next week off, and he's 65 years old, but you know, still just died. Boom, all of a sudden. Never did really hear why. And you know how it is, even with somebody like that, and when you spend a lot of time watching somebody, it kind of takes your breath away. And it reminded me of an experience I had when I walked in and saw my dad's body. You know, we followed them to the hospital, and he died of whatever it was. You know, they're trying to resuscitate him. And there was a weird kind of, I don't know what you say. I think it was an aspect of a lack of fear, rather than like, you know, that my own fear of dying and impermanence. There was all the sadness in seeing someone died, my dad dying, but there was a kind of joy, like that something was okay about it, and like liberating or free. And I remember seeing the same thing watching with Mark Haynes dying, was, you know, it's okay. I mean, you know, he died young, but I guess this sense that, well, I'm going to go through that too, and that, you know, it's one way or another. Maybe I'll get enlightened, maybe I won't. I don't really have any idea anymore. But I don't know. I was going to say something, but I can't remember what it was. But I mean, I guess what I started to say was, there is nothing a lot to say about how fantastic this practice is, I guess I was going to say there's that sense of, and a heightened sense of mortality that isn't the kind of neurotic, fearful thing, but the sense that we're all going to go through it one way or another, and we have this practice. It's already here in some sense, and I just feel so grateful to have the opportunity to keep doing it.